I think that when you can make the transition from it being seen as, oh, this is something that HR wants me to do, or this is a program, or this is some training that my manager would like me to go through. When you can shift the mindset from that to, wow, this is actually my favorite benefit that my company gives me. When people development, when leadership development becomes your people's favorite employee benefit, then you know you've done something right. And so the way you go about doing that, the way you get people to want to versus to have to, I think a lot of it has to do with how are you approaching development? Is it something that's like more of a kind of stale kind of classroom training, or some passive kind of learning management system library, or is it something that actually engages them, that is they feel like it's tailored to them as an individual, that focuses on their personal growth, not just some quote unquote business or leadership skills that they could use for the company. When they feel that personal investment, I think that's where the magic happens.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? I want you to think about the high performer that you have in your business right now. Are they ready to manage and lead other people? Now, I know the answer to this because I hear a lot of people that come to me and say, yeah, I've got this really great employee. They're really good at getting the work done. They're doers, but they've never managed before. So today we're going to look at developing other leaders. I specifically use the word leaders here because I think, management is good. We need to have people that can manage processes and improve things incrementally, and that is really important. But leaders are a different breed. You want leaders across your team as much as possible. You want to be a leader. You want others to be leaders. And so today we look at developing other leaders. Our special guest today is a podcast host, and he's also got a company called CoThryve. The podcast is Leadership on Purpose, and we have Blake Bozarth. Blake and I talk about what is getting in the way of leadership development, whether it be from the employee side and the myths around leadership development, and also what's getting in the way as leaders. So all you have to do today is sit back and really, be open to what you're going to hear about developing other leaders. Now, when you think about your own journey as a leader, are you really crystal clear about who you are, where you're going, and what's getting in your way? Well, if you are a little bit curious about what I do as an executive coach, here's your chance. I want you to lean into this for a second. I would love to talk to you about what is getting in the way of your leadership, from you being the powerful leader that you know you can be. Being a powerful leader doesn't mean you get everything right. Doesn't mean that you tell everyone how to do it and you have all the answers. But being a powerful leader is a really impactful catalyst across the company in so many ways. And it really is, I think, the most important thing for you. If your business is already scaling, it's already got money coming in, you've got customers, then you want to make sure you're leading those people in a very powerful way. Let's get on a call. Let's talk about what is really going on inside your business, inside your own leadership, and what is getting in your way. Just go to genehammett.com and schedule a call. Now, in that call, it is not a sales pitch. It truly is a chance for me to connect and deliver with you and give you the insights that you need to be a more powerful leader. Just go to genehammett.com and schedule your call today. Now, here's the interview with Blake. Blake, how are you?
I am great, Gene. Glad to be on the show.
I am glad to have you here. We're going to talk about leadership development. Before we dive into this whole topic, tell us about your business, CoThryve, and your podcast, Leadership on Purpose.
Yeah, so CoThryve is all about helping companies develop leaders. And I was fortunate to grow up in a pretty robust, what they call a leadership pipeline program inside a large Fortune 250 company. Was there for about a decade, which surprised me because I never saw myself in corporate America before then, and came out of college and entered this leadership pipeline program, spent a year and a half in different rotations, different parts of the company. I got to spend some time in London, England, and just kind of travel around with the company. Super cool experience. Fast tracked into a leadership director role and then an officer role in the company. And what I found through that is that my favorite part of my job, no matter what part of the company, no matter what function I was in, my favorite part of the job was always in being able to pour into and develop other leaders. And kind of naturally, I was starting to meet with more people informally. And I got this vision for CoThryve, which is how do we help leaders and companies thrive powered by their why? So that's why there's a weird Y in CoThryve instead of the I. It's about purpose, and leadership on purpose is the same way. It's a podcast like yours that's all about how do we help people lead on purpose and lead with confidence, lead with humility. I'll just say that I think the best way for us to change the world is to equip more purpose-driven leaders. And so that's the mission I'm on, much like you.
Well, I love this conversation. We're going to talk about developing other leaders. I just got off the call with a client I've been working with an internal leader for about 6 months, and we were just kind of looking at, where does it go from here? And I was just so thrilled by being able to be a part of him. He was so eager to come. Now, my founders are excited to come to their coaching calls too. But when someone self-selects themselves to be in a leadership development program, they're raising their hand saying, "Yeah, I want this." You've found some definite benefits when people self-select themselves into it, right?
That's right. And I think it's a big key. One thing that we talk a lot about is I think that here's my philosophy for developing people inside your company. I think that when you can make the transition from it being seen as, oh, this is something that HR wants me to do, or this is a program, or this is some training that my manager would like me to go through. When you can shift the mindset from that to, wow, this is actually my favorite benefit that my company gives me. When people development, when leadership development becomes your people's favorite employee benefit, then you know you've done something right. And so the way you go about doing that, the way you get people to want to versus to have to, I think a lot of it has to do with how are you approaching development? Is it something that's like more of a kind of stale kind of classroom training, or some passive kind of learning management system library, or is it something that actually engages them, that is they feel like it's tailored to them as an individual, that focuses on their personal growth, not just some quote unquote business or leadership skills that they could use for the company. When they feel that personal investment, I think that's where the magic happens.
I've seen the same thing too, and it's such a powerful benefit for a company to do. Investing in your employees is, we talk about it a lot, leaders do, and this is a good way to do that. So I know you've got a lot of experience. What are the top myths that we need to get out of the way, the things that you've seen people believe that just aren't true when it comes to developing other leaders?
Yes, that's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind when I hear that is, I think it's natural, and I think we all fall in this, but I think it's natural to think that there's just a certain type that, like a mold, if you will, that we're trying to fit or that we're trying to find. And so when it comes to selection, let's say, so how do you identify what people would make sense for developing into future leaders? I think one of the biggest myths is that there's a type that you have to find and then fit them and then select them into the program. What we found is that, number one, we want to make sure we're fostering a culture where we're developing every single one of our people, every single one of our team members. With that said, there's nothing wrong, and I think there's actually a lot good with identifying certain people inside of your company that you want to give a special level of investment in. You want to give a special opportunity to step into. And so I'll say the myth is that there's a certain type. But what I would say, what we found is that one of my favorite frameworks from Patrick Lencioni, I'm sure you've heard it, the Hungry, Humble, Smart. It's a great framework for identifying what he calls the ideal team player. When we're looking at more than just team player, we're looking at people that can become future leaders, that could actually lead at a higher level inside the company and produce an outsized impact. We say, hey, they need to have that prerequisite Hungry, Humble, Smart. But more than that, we want to be looking for people that have natural influence already. So they might not be like the prototypical leader based on paper or resume, but when they speak, people listen. They have the influence, they have the ear of their peers, of their team, even of some of their superiors even. So they have natural influence, they have heart, they have humility, and they have vision. And so those are the things that we look for, and that can come in a lot of different forms. They may not look like the rest of your executive team right now, but if you're finding those things, if you're finding the ones that have natural influence, that have heart, that have vision, then those are people that are really worth digging into and investing in.
Like, one of the biggest challenges I hear commonly from founders and CEOs is the fact that I've got a really good high performer that is capable of doing their job, but now I need them to lead a team, and they've never led a team before. They've never managed a person. How do you respond to, how do you get that person ready to actually be a leader across this team?
Great question. And I see this all the time as well. And it's one of the things that, especially, I know you work with a lot of scaling companies, growth stage companies that are growing. When you go from being, hey, we're a lean team and we're fairly flat and we're successful, so we're growing, we're adding new people, we're starting to ask some of our top performers to start managing those people. It's not a one-for-one thing that, hey, if you're a top performer in this role, you're going to be able to lead people well. The good news is, though, we believe that leadership can be developed and can be coached. So Are some people more naturally wired with certain giftings that we think of for leaders? Absolutely. But the good news is it can be coached. So I would say, I think it's a good thing to measure like, hey, who are our top performers? More than that, though, I would be looking at, hey, who are my great team players? They're already difference makers. However you measure that, they're difference makers, but they're people that already have, again, some kind of natural influence in the organization. I think that's the best metric, or the best trait to be able to say, how is that going to translate into a leadership role? Do they already have natural influence? How are they viewed and perceived by their peers already? Because if they don't, then that can be more of an uphill battle. But again, the good news is you can take a top performer who might not be naturally skilled at leading and managing people, and you can coach and you can develop. And there's a lot of ways you can go about doing that, which I'm sure you have experience with as well. But it's not as easy as just giving them a team and saying, hey, make them as good as you are.
Absolutely not. I mean, from my experience, that's actually disaster, because when they do that, they get frustrated because a lot of times these high performers have figured it out for themselves, and they will actually break that mold. They will not figure it out for themselves. They'll actually do the work for their people. They will, hands feed them and really micromanage, because they've been so attached to the doing side of the job instead of the leading side of the job. How do you get people to break from that habit?
That's so true. And I think it's a mindset shift, Gene. I think it's helping them realize, hey, what does success look like in this role that you've been given versus what success looked like in your prior, more individual contributor role? A lot of times we measure our success, we define productivity in certain ways. As you invite people into formal leadership roles where they're leading teams of performers doing the work, doing the day-to-day, it's helping them transition their own view of what success looks like for them, and elevating that game. And so I was recently having a coaching discussion with a senior executive in a company. And even for this senior exec, one of the things that we're working through is, what does it look like going from a VP at a high level that's leading a team, that's basically leading leaders of people, to now being an SVP that's leading leaders of people. And just the way you up level your view of the value you bring to the organization. So it's helping them center on, hey, my value is not tied to the day-to-day production, quote unquote, that I do as I've defined it in the past. It's tied to, how do I get the best out of the people around me? And the best leaders are able to come into a team of people and to be able to draw out the best from them, and to play to their strengths, to understand where are the gaps on the team, where do we need someone to actually step in over here and complement someone else's gaps, what's somebody's strengths that we can really accentuate. And when you get them to transition to say, hey, it's no longer about what I'm individually performing, it's about how I am motivating, how I'm inspiring, how I'm coaching, and ultimately I know it's a buzzword, how I'm empowering the people around me. And one thing we'll do, I'll just add here, we take some of those buzzwords, like, what does it mean to delegate? I know that's a hard thing, especially for people that are top performers, to actually be able to delegate. What does it really mean to delegate? And it starts with a lot of people think of delegation as, hey, I'm just going to be able to give away some tasks. I'm going to give those to somebody else to do. That's great, but that's the first rung on the ladder. As you go up the delegation ladder, it really looks like, how do you delegate more and more authority away versus just tasks? So it's getting people to be comfortable saying, hey, when I'm really trying to empower people, when I'm trying to delegate, what I'm really doing is I'm giving away power. That's what empower means. I'm giving away power as much as possible. And I'm trusting, and it requires trust, but I'm trusting a team, trusting my people around me to produce. And that's what great leaders do. They ultimately are the ones who extend the trust. They provide the clarity. We say there's two currencies to empowerment. Got this from Craig Rochelle, who I know you will appreciate as well. Two currencies to empowerment: clarity and trust. So great leaders they're providing clarity. What does success look like? What is the why behind this? How does this fit into the big picture? They're giving clarity, and they're extending trust. They're not looking over their shoulder. They're truly trusting someone else to own something, and they're verifying, they're driving accountability. But when you're doing those things well, and you're giving away true power and authority, that's how you help somebody see their role differently and transition to really being a leader versus just a great individual contributor performer.
Now, we've just wrapped up the first part of this whole section with Blake, and I wanted to just recap this for a second. The selection part is one of the most important pieces you can do in leadership development. Who are the people on your team that are influencers already. They're probably pretty good at what they are doing. They probably have a good strategic sense of where the business is going, and they have a very good picture of the vision that you've already cast. But are they able to build trust with others? Are they able to collaborate? You have to ask yourself these questions, because those are the people that are probably going to be your best leaders. They understand people, because those that don't understand people, it's hard to teach them how to build trust, because a lot of stuff gets in the way, and usually it's themselves. They think it should be one way and it's not. They get frustrated very easily. And there's a whole bunch of things. Find the influencers across the company, the ones that are already building trust. Now, one of the things I was just talking to a client of mine about, what you really want to make sure is you're able to develop this person inside, because going outside the group, finding someone that can manage outside of them is a real big challenge. And you want to make sure you can find that person inside. Your job is to develop other leaders. So please select the right people. Back to Blake. I want to transition into part 2 of this conversation, because we've been talking about developing other leaders, but I'm sure you've seen leaders of the people that you're developing across all the work that you're doing, Blake, that are making some mistakes. They're getting in the way of their leaders developing. What is getting in the way that you see?
Yes, there's a lot. I think for one thing, I think we can overdo it sometimes, and for all the best intentions, we can overdo the way that we're trying to develop people. And one thing that I see a lot of is, hey, we're gonna have them go through these courses. I'm working with a client now that wanted to make available and even require for certain level of leadership to go through some online courses that were actually through some top universities, and it was a great kind of certificate programs. The problem is that the way that this training, that these courses were delivered, it wasn't fitting the bill for what their team felt like they really needed, and it was kind of impersonal. They felt like, they were just kind of having to go through some additional busy work in order to earn a certification. So I think that's one common mistake that a lot of leaders can do is, hey, we know we need to be developing our people, so let's figure out a budget and let's figure out the programming to do that. Let's decide on the programming to do that. I would say for all the best intentions, that can be counterproductive. That can cause people to become even more disconnected from your company, and you won't get much ROI on that kind of investment. If you start on the front end and say, hey, what is the thing for our team, for our leaders that we want to invest in? What is the thing that's really going to make them come alive? And again, for me, I think one of the keys to this is really focusing on the personal growth angle and making them feel like, hey, this is something that it's like an employee benefit. Back to the employee benefit piece. Like I feel like I am growing as a person and as a leader and in my career at this company. When you combine those things, that's where the magic happens. So that's one thing I think where we can go wrong is by investing and requiring actually the wrong sorts of development activities and programming. But I also think that we can do a bad job, speaking of clarity, we can do a bad job of giving them a clear picture of what success looks like. We might assume that they know what success looks like. Hey, you're in this level of leadership, and I've been in leadership for 20 plus years. So I think a lot of times we might assume that those leaders we're trying to develop understand what it means to be successful in their role. But I think that's actually where I spend a lot of time with coaching clients, is on being able to really get clear with your team on painting a picture for success, and then being able to support and then challenge effectively. And one thing that we talk a lot about is if you think of it, there's something called a support challenge matrix. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Gene, but I learned this from a guy named Jeremy Kubicek. Had him on the podcast in the beginning of my show. Incredible thought leader in the leadership space. But he has this, he calls it the support challenge matrix, excuse me. And the idea behind it is that the best leaders are high in support and they're high in challenge, meaning that they're high in support. They're there for you. You feel like they're there for you as a person, not just for the team results. They're there to coach. They're there to encourage. They're very uplifting. And here's the key: they're also there to challenge, meaning that they're there to stretch you, meaning that they're very candid in their communication. They're very clear in their expectations, and they're very comfortable driving accountability, right? Most of us, if we're being honest with ourselves, I say 99.9% of leaders are not naturally high in both of those things. And so what happens is we typically tend to gravitate towards one of those spectrums over the other, either support or challenge. For me, I am naturally high in support, and I'm not naturally high in challenge. I love stretching people. I love helping people grow. Where I naturally, in my natural state, where I fall down is that I am not good at driving accountability, and I'm not naturally good at kind of clear expectations and feedback. That could be, I never want to hurt somebody's feelings, right? I grew up in a culture where we sugarcoated everything in our family, and that's just the way it was. I've had to really work. So for me, I have to be intentional, knowing that about myself. I have to be intentional to say, hey, I'm going to have to put myself outside my comfort zone. And again, that comfort zone has grown over the years as I've worked on this to be higher in challenge. And so I think that's something that when we're not painting a clear picture for our people of what success in our leaders, our emerging leaders, even of what success looks like in their roles, and where we're not providing enough support, if that's the case for you, or we're not providing enough challenge. And there's always opportunity. There's always opportunity to stretch yourself more on what doesn't come as natural to you, either the support piece or the challenge piece.
One last question, Blake. After the training's done, what do you wish leaders knew that they don't seem to know about how to keep that person growing and evolving and really plugged in so that they actually realize the benefits of leadership development?
I love that question. One thing we see is that this is a tragic statistic, but 95%, Gene, 95% of these high potential talent programs, they fail to drive what we call development follow through. So they might have incredible planning, they might have the best curriculum and even delivery of the training, but they don't actually experience the sustained development follow through. That's why 3/4 of executives feel like their leadership programming is failing. They know they need to be doing it, but they feel like it's failing, that they're not seeing the follow through. They're not actually seeing people equipped to step into greater levels of responsibility. So in terms of what can you do about that, I think a big piece, and we're very passionate about this. I know you do this as well with the clients you work with. A big piece of driving that follow through is tapping into the power of micro community, what we call tapping into the power of a peer group. And the idea behind this is very simple. I know you're familiar with this concept. It's called a mastermind concept, but the idea is how do you surround talented people with each other and give them a forum where they can support each other, they can challenge each other, they can share learnings, and ultimately they can accomplish more and help each other elevate. It's really hard to stay consistent on a growth plan when you're doing it in a vacuum. When you're doing it with your peers at work, and you can see that, hey, these are the things that Gene's trying to accomplish this quarter. These are the things that Gene's going after this month. That's inspiring. I love seeing that. And I'm going to encourage him. I'm going to actually provide a little bit of accountability for him to do that. And when others are doing that for you, it's no one can do it for you. But when you tap into the peer group in the right way, that your chances of actually driving real momentum and sustaining momentum go up exponentially.
Blake, we've gone through this entire episode and we forgot to bring up the special project that you have.
Yes.
A book that's come out, and it really is about our younger leaders in life. Tell us just a little bit about this before we wrap up.
Yeah. So I mentioned before in the beginning of the show, I really think that the best way to change the world is by inspiring more purpose-driven leaders. And this book was a project purposeful for that. And so I think it starts from a young age. I think that the more that we can get people seeing themselves as leaders and embracing what leadership really means, serving others, and ultimately being difference makers in the world, having something they're passionate about that they have purpose in and driving change, the younger that we can get people to do that, the better. So this is a kid's book about leadership. It's called I Want to Be a Leader When I Grow Up. And it was a super fun project. At some point, I'll be writing business books, leadership books as well for grownups. But I got to tell you, Gene, it's a lot of fun being able to talk about and promote a kid's book, because as parents, we definitely want to help our kids channel their inner leaders. And if you know a kid, do you want to help them do that? But it's really about seeing it come to life in the kids' eyes and making a book that's actually fun. Had some great help from my buddy Timmy Bauer at Dinosaur House Publishing that was able to provide great illustrations, but also some of the fun reaction triggers that make it a enjoyable read for the kids, but to just help them understand, hey, this is what it means. You don't have to wait to be a grown-up to be a leader. That's the whole point. Is the title is I Want to Be a Leader When I Grow Up, and it's crossed out and it says now. You can choose to be a leader now, and you can embrace your influence you have now, and you don't have to wait. So we're excited about it. It's great to see it out in people's hands and kids enjoying it.
Blake, thank you so much for being here on the podcast, sharing your insights around developing other leaders. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gene. Thanks so much.